Hey everybody, we're back here Inside the Ropes, and I am joined by a mountain of a man. He could batter me if I even looked at him the wrong way. He is Jonah, now part of New Japan Pro Wrestling. It is very good to speak to you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on the show.
I mean, it's what a year for you so far, ups and downs. But this week you're going to make your in-ring debut for New Japan against David Finlay at Nemesis. I mean, I bet at the beginning of this year you did not think that you would be in New Japan Pro Wrestling by the end of the year. So it must be a kind of interesting turn of events.
Yeah, I definitely didn't think that 2021 didn't go exactly how I thought it would to plan, especially with what I thought I had in plans with WWE and creative and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But it's almost, I wouldn't say a happy accident, but I'm really looking forward to 2022, and the stuff that I have been doing in these past month has made me very happy and fulfilled with my pro wrestling journey.
So how did New Japan come about then? You know, you get the release, you've got the time where you can't technically do anything, but what made New Japan the choice?
Well, when I was released, I had, big, deep and meaningful speak with my wife, and I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do, where I wanted to go. And she was the one that said to me, like, you've always loved Japanese wrestling and always wanted to go back to Japan. I think that's what you should do. And obviously there's a lot of companies out there and a lot of people vying for different talent. And at the moment, more and more people have been released. So it's sort of not that you can pick and choose, but some places, take some people and some people go some places. And for me, it was pretty easy. Like, New Japan was the number one place that I wanted to go. I had worked in Japan before for Pro Wrestling Noah, but not for New Japan. So that was something I wanted to do. And it was something that I wanted to tick off my bucket list, when I was done with my WWE career. And obviously that came to a shorter halt than what I thought it would. Mm-hmm. And as soon as I was released, the first person to contact me about working somewhere actually was Rocky Romero for New Japan. So it just seemed fitting that that's where I go.
I mean, and I want to say this next thing very carefully, because I want to be very sensitive to anybody who's lost their job this year. But I mean, I guess for you, what is kind of interesting is that you are not someone who was not being used or somebody who was kind of at the tail end. You were on the rise. So, I mean, was that kind of going through your head that, here's something that a benefit for me that I can kind of use when going other places or when looking for work?
Yeah, 100%. I've said that before in interviews as well. It's not to downplay anyone else's experience, but when I was released, I was a big shock in comparison to some of the other people that were released alongside me. I didn't sit on the shelf. I wasn't there not doing anything. I was heavily utilized and sort of, I guess you could say I was a Hunter and Sean guy. That's sort of what I was. But it has worked to my benefit. I said to people that I didn't even get to peak in my WWE career. So now I'm going to go elsewhere and peak elsewhere, and places like New Japan Pro Wrestling, places like Impact Wrestling are going to get the benefit of that.
And I guess, I mean, it would be the most obvious thing in the world for me to ask if you are excited about going to Japan when you get the chance.
Yeah, very excited. For the time being, I'm doing the New Japan Strong shows here in the USA. But when immigration and stuff like that permits, obviously times are difficult and sensitive at the moment. I can't wait to actually step foot into Japan and wrestle over there again.
And I know you've said that you're with New Japan. You've also got the non-exclusive deal with Impact. I mean, when you were released, one of the first things people would think was AEW, and they do have the relationship with New Japan. Is that something that you want to do even on a non-exclusive basis? Has there been any movement on that at all?
Yeah, I mean, I did speak with AEW briefly. We couldn't come to any sort of deal or anything like that. New Japan is my priority, and then Impact Wrestling, because they reached out to me as well and have taken good care of me. But I won't say that it's off of the books. It's something that's not in my focus right now, but somewhere down the line, you could see Jonah in AEW for sure.
And we've seen you announced as well for the Battle of Los Angeles 2022. I mean, it feels like you're making moves. It feels like you're I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it feels like, with everybody released and all this free agents talent, there is that sort of, I guess urgency to kind of do a lot of stuff and put yourself on the map. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I feel like there's going to be more and more competition and people vying to get, spots. Spots are only so there's only so many spots you can have on a show, on a wrestling show, and WWE was very much like that. And I think for the longest time, maybe they did hold too much talent and there was a lot of people sitting around not doing anything.
Mm-hmm.
But now with the influx of not only the talent from WWE, but Ring of Honor now closing shops for a little while or whatever they're doing, and you have up and coming indie guys, it just makes it a very competitive landscape. And I wanted to make sure that I stood out. So making sure that I was in New Japan, I made an impact, as a pun, I guess, with Impact Wrestling, and now being the first entrant of the Battle of Los Angeles, I wanted people to see that, okay, Jonah's one of the staple guys in professional wrestling that's going to be everywhere.
And obviously, you had to make a name change. Jonah's the name. What was the thought process behind the name Jonah?
Yeah, well, before WWE, I was Jonah Rock. Leaving WWE, I didn't want to, I never really wanted to change from Jonah to Bronson. It was just, they didn't want Jonah Rock at all. So I was like, okay, cool. And I pitched so many names with Jonah in it, and they always turned it down. So then we came up with Bronson Reed. And then as soon as I was being released, I'm like, well, I'm going back to Jonah. I wanted to have a little bit of something fresh to it. So I dropped the Rock. So it's just Jonah in all capitals. I want people to always see it that way, it's always in capitals. It's this one big name.
And just out of pure curiosity, what was your favorite Jonah-based name that you pitched to WWE when you were trying to get a name with Jonah in it?
I mean, I just did so many different last names, even to the degree of Bronson Reed. I did Jonah Reed. I had Jonah Rogue. Obviously, they didn't want Rock, so I had so many different last names. And I did pitch just Jonah on its own as well, because I know sometimes with WWE, you end up losing that second name anyway.
Yeah.
But they wanted something completely theirs, if you will.
Yeah. And so let's go back to August when the release happens. You talked about, it was such a shock for you. You've said, you didn't see it coming and stuff. I mean, how do you kind of get the news, digest it, and then make the game plan? Because it's got to be a sort of roller coaster of emotions.
Yeah, I feel like I took it pretty well. I've spoken to a lot of other people that have been released, a lot of other friends as well that have been released, and a lot of them, took it pretty hard. And as you would, they were upset, they cried, all of those emotions. But the way I was brought up in professional wrestling by my coach in Australia, he was very, very hard ass sort of man. He always taught me that pro wrestling owes you nothing. That was one of the things he said over and over and over. And going throughout my whole career, there has been ups and downs. And there's been times where I've had heartbreak from wrestling before, trying to get into WWE when I thought I was never going to get there. And they've told me no a couple of times before. So when I had this happen, I wasn't upset. I was just more shocked because of how well I was doing. If any emotion I had, it was probably anger. It was probably like, well, you guys messed up. I'm going to make you see why you messed up.
And I mean, because I could be getting the timeline here wrong, so correct me if I am. Because I'm sure that, maybe a couple of weeks before you were released, or maybe a month, you were up doing a match in main event, or you were doing stuff, and it seemed like the plans were there for Bronson Reed to go to the main roster. I mean, how far did that get? Did you ever have conversations with Vince? Like, where did you kind of see things before, obviously, the unexpected happened?
Yeah, that was the other big shock as well. As my expectation was that I was going to Raw or SmackDown potentially. I was told that by people in NXT as well. That was the reason I dropped the North American Championship. And I was sort of, what they told me, I was in a creative holding pattern until the main roster does whatever they want to do with you. So I did the dark match on SmackDown, and I did a main event taped match as well for Vince. I had a meeting with him for like 15 minutes. He was very happy with everything. So in my mind, I'm like, okay, it's just a matter of time before I go up to Raw or SmackDown. And 2 weeks after my last match in NXT, which was with Adam Cole, of all people, I had a call from John Laurinaitis while I was watching SmackDown. So I said to my wife, I go, oh, this must be about going up to SmackDown. and I answer, and I'm, I'm happy. How's it going, Johnny? All this stuff. And then he goes, oh, sorry, I need to let you know we're releasing you. So I was just completely shocked. So.
And I mean, I obviously you can't speak for the whole industry, but do you think we've seen so many releases happen in 2021? Do you think that's going to change? Because it seems like in the last few years, everybody's dream was to go to WWE. That was the dream that everybody had.
Yes.
Do you think now, with the sort of level of uncertainty that is not going to feel like as much of a, cold hard, this is where everybody wants to go, given the uncertainty?
Yeah, 100%. I feel like, especially I coach back home in Australia, and there's a lot of young up and comers there that I helped at the start of their career, and they're still up and coming. And from speaking to them, their mindset has completely changed over these last couple of years, with how WWE has been. And now with them blatantly saying, like, we want to recruit college athletes, people not from within the indie wrestling scene, you got to think all those indie wrestlers and guys that have been pursuing this for their whole life are probably going to look at other avenues.
And I do want to ask you about something that you said on Twitter, because I was obviously stalking you before our interview. You bench press 500 pounds, which is very impressive.
Yes, thank you.
You got your in-ring debuts for Impact in New Japan, and someone had tweeted you in response to that saying, I miss you in NXT. And you said, the place I loved doesn't exist anymore.
Yes.
Do you expand on that a little bit?
It's just not the place it is anymore, and that's from speaking to friends that are still there. They completely gutted it, made it NXT 2.0. The black and gold is gone. Obviously, you still have some of those same performers. And obviously, it's unfortunate Hunter has been sick and he hasn't been able to be there, but it was all Hunter's vision. It was Triple H's vision for a wrestling show. I felt that working for NXT, a lot of us guys that were on the television product, guys like myself, Adam Cole, Johnny Gargano, Ciampa, the guys that really took it seriously, saw NXT as a third brand. And I always saw it as sort of, you had Raw and SmackDown as the big entertainment wrestling shows, but NXT was almost the pro wrestling show for WWE. Like, that's where you can come and watch wrestling. It was a little bit still counterculture and different to the other two shows. And now I see it as just another fabricated version of a Raw or SmackDown, but just in a smaller time slot.
And one of my favorite matches that you had in NXT was you and Johnny Gargano on the main event of NXT. I mean, it was just phenomenal. I mean, I assume he's someone you would love to get in the ring with again, depending if circumstances allow that to happen.
Of course, yeah, definitely. I've said it before in interviews that he was one of the best guys I worked with in NXT. He has a similar mindset to what I have, in that you always want to have the best match possible, no matter who you're out there with. And I've always been like that, and he was always like that. So it was a joy to be able to work with him. I don't know exactly what's happening with him at the moment, but if, circumstances allow it, I'd love to get in the ring with him again.
And obviously, Nemesis is on the horizon this week, but just for a little bit of fantasy booking, when Jonah finally does get to go to Japan, say it's a Wrestle Kingdom, whatever it is, what is one of the big matches that you want to have in New Japan?
Yeah, there's definitely a few, and I always set myself little goals. And I know number one to begin with is Ishii, and he has that open weight title. Mm-hmm. And I feel like I could be a very good representative of that open weight championship. And people have wanted that match for a long time. Even before I was in WWE, people were like, when are we going to get to see Jonah Rock and Ishii? And it never happened. So that's number one. And obviously, if you're in any company, you're going to want to be the champion. So I have my eyes up the top with guys, whoever becomes champion after Wrestle Kingdom, whether it's Shingo, Will Ospreay, or Okada. Those are the guys that I want to get in the ring with, because I want to be the next, the modern day Big Van Vader or Scott Norton or big foreigner that came over to Japan and beat everyone up.
Well, listen, it's been a rough year covering wrestling to see so many people have all this stuff happen. But I feel like you are like the good story that we get to, or one of the good stories that we get to look at and go, at least Jonah's okay. At least Jonah's doing all right.
Yeah, you have to make the best of whatever situation you're in. And now I feel like 2022 is just going to be incredible for me for wrestling.